Hey guys, we're back with notes for 8.5. Today we're going to be solving quadratics by completing the square. The front page of this note is really just teaching you to check and see if you have a perfect square so that you don't have to complete it. Okay, the example problems are going to be on the second two pages. This one's going to be a little bit longer of a video. So remember, feel free to go back and re-watch this or do it in pieces if you need an example to look back at. Okay. All right, so I'm not going to go over a lot of the steps. I think it's going to make more sense if you see it, but I want to write one essential question on your paper real quick. This is what I'm going to be asking you over and over and over. In my quadratic equation, if I cut the middle number b in half and square that, would I get c? Okay, so would those numbers match? If we say yes on this front page, I'm just going to put a check mark for now. If not, and that's where step 2 is going to come in, that's where we're going to kind of complete the square or create a new equation that can make that happen. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Okay. All right, so for this first example, here's what I'm looking at. I've got my A, my B, and my C. So I'm going to be asking myself, if I cut 6 in half, what would we get? 3. If I took 3 squared, would I get 9? So again, I'm checking. Don't write this down yet, but if I'm checking, if I cut 6 in half and I get 3, and then I square that, do I get this number C? Yes, in this case I do. So for right now, I want you to just put a check mark next to this one. Okay? Again, we'll see what that looks like in just a second. Let's try number 2. If I cut that number B in half, what would I get? I would get -2, right? If I squared -2, what would we get? Would it be 16? No. All right, so I want you to put just a little x here. And here's what we're going to do with that then. We're going to go ahead and we're going to copy our equation, x squared minus 4x, but instead of us keeping that 16, we're going to get rid of him. And we're going to put a blank where he used to be. Now, if you saw back in 2, if we don't like C, if we don't like 16, we can't just poof, get rid of him. We've got to move him to the other side. And what happens when we move him to the other side is that his sign changes. So we've changed him to a -16. Now, I put a blank here because I'm going to put a different number in that place. But remember, the whole rule in algebra is what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So if I'm going to put this little extra blank here, I have to do the same thing on the other side. I have to put an extra blank. Okay? So now if I go back and I ask you, half of B is a -2, right? And a -2 squared would make what? That would make a 4. So I'm going to put my new 4 on both sides of that equation. Okay? That's all we're doing for this first step. Let's try number 3. On number 3, my question is, if I cut B in half, what would we get? -5, right? -5 squared, would that equal C? No, it wouldn't. So here's what we do. We're going to copy the equation, x squared minus 10x plus, and I am going to replace that 20 with something else. Now, I can't just lose that 20, just like I can't lose the 16. I have to move it to the other side. So we're going to move 20 to the other side, make it negative, and then that same blank that I made, I have to put on the other side. So let's try again. What number would I want? So if I'm taking -10, I cut it in half, I make -5, and now I square that. -5 squared makes a 25. So I'm putting 25 in my blank on both sides. Okay. All right, let's look at this last one. Next one, sorry, not last one. All right, if I cut B in half, what's half of 2? Be a 1. If I square 1, do I get C? Yes, 1 times 1, it already works. Okay, we're going to number 5. Number 5, if I cut this number in half, again, my A, B, C, I would get -6. Is -6 squared 36? Yes, it is. All right, so let's go ahead and put a check mark for him. Last one. Got my A, B, and C. If I cut 8 in half, I get 4. If I square that, do we get C? No. So again, I can't just get rid of that 10. I've got to move it to the other side, and we're going to put a blank in his space. So I'm moving 10 to the other side, changing it to a negative, and I'm putting that extra blank on both sides. Now, what do we wish was there? Well, half of 8 is 4. 4 squared is 16. So 16 is what I'm putting in those blanks. All right, so that's our first step, is just kind of seeing, do I have a perfect square? If I don't, then I have to make one, okay? Because here's what we have the benefit of. A perfect square, let me zoom in real quick. A perfect square was any time on the Punnett square box where you had like x minus 5, and you were allowed to write it like this. That's what we're making right now, okay? Now, we're not doing the cross and box and all of that, but we're recognizing the pattern of these. Okay, so I'm going to change colors one more time. Let's go with, all right, let's go with purple. So on problem 1, now that we have this, we are going to be setting it up as a perfect square. We're always going to keep our x, and this piece right here is going to be my half. So remember how we were saying, what is half of b? When I say positive 3, I'm going to write that down. Okay, so let me change here. Half of b is positive 3. And 3 squared should make this 9, right? Okay. What was on the other side was just my 0. So since that one already worked, that's all we're doing right now. Let's go to problem 2. Problem 2. Remember, our idea is to set up something squared. We're keeping our x, and we're asking ourselves, what was half of this b number? Half of that was a negative 2, because negative 2 squared made this 4, right? All right, so if I'm keeping my negative 2, we are now going to combine what's left over here. Okay, so if I combine that, I'm left with a negative 12. So this is my final piece right here. Parentheses x minus 2, parentheses squared, equals a negative 12. Okay. Let's try number 3. Number 3, again, my goal is to make a perfect square. So parentheses squared equals, keeping my x, we're going to ask ourselves, what was half of that b number? Half of it was a minus 5 or a negative 5. And when I combine over here, I get a positive 5. That's my answer right now. Okay, number 4 was pretty much done for us. We didn't have to do much, so we're keeping the 0, nothing to combine, keeping the x. And then what was half of b? It was a plus 1. Number 5 was already done for us also, so if we're setting it up, we're keeping the 0, there was nothing to combine. Half of my b was a minus 6. So x minus 6 is squared. Bring down my equals 0. Last one like this. If I go ahead and I set up my parentheses, keep my x, half of b was a positive 4, so plus 4. And then if I combine over here, negative 10 plus 16, I would get 6. Okay. All right, so that these videos don't get out of control, I'm going to stop there, and we're going to set up a new video for the second half of this, okay? So go ahead and switch to 8.4, video 2.